Hi there everybody, and welcome to this week's Art of Procurement podcast. And I'm Philip Heitzen, and I want to really thank you so much for listening to the show week in, week out. You know, I don't express that enough. It's truly amazing to me, the reach that the show has. And so today we're actually going to do something a little bit different on the podcast. I'm actually joined by Julienne Ryan. And Julienne is principal of J. Ryan Partners and actually a former executive director of the Institute for Supply Management's New York affiliate. But the majority of her career has actually been in the world of HR, recruitment, and organizational development. And I was introduced to Julienne by my friends at Procurement. She actually keynoted one of the main stage sessions at the recent Procurement Indirect West conference that I attended. And that keynote, it wasn't on procurement, it was actually on effective communications. So I invited Julienne onto the show to actually talk a little bit more about the art of storytelling, you know, how we can use storytelling both in our careers, you know, our career narrative, but also as we look to influence our stakeholders and kind of make the data that we often operate, you know, we operate in a data world. How can we actually make that more compelling by using the art of storytelling? It's a really interesting discussion. I learned a lot from it. And as you listen, you'll hear that, like last week, we chatted while in the gardens of the conference venue in what was pretty scorching Phoenix sun. The actual presentation or the conversation, that we had last week with David Hearn, you know, that was earlier in the morning. We're getting into the midday sun by this time, so it's pretty warm. Anyway, let me go into the conversation. I started by asking Julienne if she could just share a little bit more on the keynote that she presented.
Well, my topic was I called it the perils of communication. What happens when we're distracted in talking, which was a covert title because all I wanted to do is basically get people laughing and looking up and talking about the fact that we use these amazing mobile devices for helping us connect with people. But we are basically mutated into a head-down species, and we're not looking up and paying attention as much. So I was on a whole mission, in fact, to convince people in my quirky way about what we're doing with our thought process. Right. We're making assumptions about what's not working in our lives, and we're getting a little angry sometimes, but to make fun of it, like what our brain is actually thinking, that we're not reaching the person and using the lookup part of their brain or the listening part, or what the procurement people probably want the most is the signing contracts and getting the agreements out. And I was thinking about what could make it fun. Right. Because no one wants to be yelled at and talked at and say you need to improve your communications. That's not my style. Mine is about getting people to laugh and listen and have a little fun while they're realizing I'm talking about all of us.
Well, you know, I was really interested and kind of intrigued in the session. You know, I always think that from a procurement perspective, we kind of the data, we try and let the data do the talking when we're trying to convince, when we're trying to influence, when we're trying to share maybe what we think might be the best practice for an organization or what decisions that we make. But truly what we forget about, and I think about this because in my background, you know, I was a little bit of a marketer, certainly in college, and I always think about the art of the story, and we kind of miss storytelling when we try and tell essentially stories through facts and data. And as an organization, it's probably something that we can learn a lot from, is how to step away from that and be more human. I'm interested, you've been here at Procurement for the last few days.
Yes.
Is that something that you see as and actually, let me step back. You know, you've really had a lot of background in the procurement function as well as being from a HR background. I talked about your background in the intro. How did you even get involved in procurement in the first place?
I was involved because my boss told me to go show up at someone's department. Yeah. And it was back, I was doing consulting work with American Express. I was working on a lot of big marketing and technology projects when the new technology was still just in its infancy, and financial services was starting to use it, et cetera. And then I got the summons to go visit this group called Procurement. And I remember thinking, what an odd name for a department. But it was fascinating, and it was my entry into working with supply chain afterwards. So I had to learn a lot of terminology because when you work with anything in recruiting, you had to learn everyone's buzzwords and the language.
And we use plenty of it.
Oh, my word. And it's worse now. I can't tell you. But I have always been fascinated I know about the backstory, about how somebody works, why they choose the work they do. And I find it's fun. It's like some women go buy shoes and jewelry. I ask people about their stories, and that gets me wildly happy. And it's fun. And you learn a lot along the way. It's like a massive education. And so I read a lot of books and learned a lot of terminology and asked a lot of questions. And finally, I worked with a few companies on supply chain. Diageo, some time ago before they were merged. Avon Global, that was interesting with all their products. But along the way, always applying what I learned in the past and then moving forward. I even worked as an executive director.
You were part of ISM for you as well.
What's that? Which part?
Sorry, I thought you were involved in ISM in New York.
Yes, I was.
Well.
For 2 years. Yeah. I was their executive director in New York, and I was a one-man show. That was a very interesting project to take on, but I learned a lot because at the beginning I was thinking, what am I thinking? I'm going to do expos, I'm going to do annual conferences, but it introduced me to so many good people and actually taught me a lot about setting up events and and professional development, what was going on. And it was the thing that actually got me to ProcureCon, because in the midst of pitching ISM-New York, I got introduced to somebody who clearly thought I didn't need an audition tape. I just said, send her there. She'll be able to talk to all of you. I don't think there's many people that want to joke about procurement and things, so I kind of fit a narrow niche.
We try and be a little bit too serious sometimes, I think. So you spent the last few days here. What have you taken from the days that you've spent among, the procurement community here?
Well, I give them credit because it's so hard to get away from your day-to-day, and I see a lot of people juggling that because you can't plan a crisis or something that's happened in another part of the world. But the effort to learn and listen and benefit from each other. I think there's been really smart folks here. I thought there was some compelling panels for very good speakers. And there were good opportunities to hang out and just chat with each other. I'm a big believer in you need a little bit of scripting, but you have to have enough for downtime. It's the hanging out and have the coffee speech or waiting online for something that where you get the best connections and really get a sense of rapport and joking around and just finding out a little bit more about them.
Kind of getting to know each other and kind of empathizing and being able to understand kind of where we're from.
Well, the story part, storytelling is about, we're all wired for it. Yeah. And the whole point of story is there's a beginning, a middle, and end. So it can be a short, it can be a little anecdote, what happened to you on the way to the airport, etc. But the reason it works and it stays remembered is it hits an emotional chord. You're calling out to the me too in everybody and saying, oh, that person gets me. Yeah. Oh, I understand. I've had those moments where it didn't go wrong, or those were my hero moments. And people connect a little differently when they realize that, like in my case this morning, I definitely left it out there on the stage in my quirky way, talking about queens and communication. And people are more willing to share, saying, if you were brave, at least I could do is form a couple of full sentences and connect and reach across the table and make some conversation. So I'm mad because the hardest part of this is I don't get to listen to what everybody's talking. That is the hardest part. I want to be like eavesdropping, and then I have to go be a proper facilitator and keep us on schedule, which is the worst.
One of the things you said about was how important it is to be authentic. And I think that's something that we miss too, because at least from my personal experience, I will go into a situation and you kind of put the business Phil on, and the business Phil face may be different from the personal Phil face. And we become somebody who maybe we're not really, because we think that the environment that we're in demands us to act in a certain way, or to speak using certain terminology or language, or not to look in a certain way, whatever it is. We kind of think that we have to be somebody who perhaps we're not. And it's hard to get away from that. And I think, when I work with folks who are their natural selves, it just lends yourself to building better relationships.
Well,
that may be it.
Everything I said today was true. It was kind of edited for artistic license, but the conversation I talking Joanna Martinez, and you know her, and we know her, and I've known her a long time. Amazing. But we literally had that conversation, and I was like, oh my word. And all the processes of saying, which persona do I want to show up at? But I can't out tech you guys. I can't out schematic, and I don't like doing that part of it. So I was like, I got to just show up and be me. And, there's a common thread to all of us, no matter what anybody's doing for a living. We want to be heard. We want to be listened to. We want to have someone cheer us on, maybe recognize something we didn't see in ourselves. And those are the people remember. I mean, I can tell you people I know here now that I met them 2 years ago, and they're one of the reasons I connected with them, and they stayed true, and really had some champions of what we're all doing for each other. So
how can we use the power of a story in our day jobs? We talked about how we can use that to help build relationships, but I'm thinking of it in terms of, I said at the beginning, we use data, we use facts. How can we take a step back and actually think about positioning maybe points that we want to get across, but using it in a narrative form rather than just saying, hey, this is the information? Is there even a place for that?
Yes, absolutely. Listen, I'm not saying you're going to do the Iliad and be there for a couple hours telling some long story, but you can do it with simple anecdotes. You can do it to explain to people, because we say we want to do intelligent things and change, but when it comes to stuff in our own area, we need to be convinced and build trust. And the best way you can do is say, this is why we start to do this work. This is what went wrong. This is what we learned, whether it's a case study. But even with a case study, if you can show where you sweated out a little bit and cried it out a little bit or worried a lot, I think people start to believe you. And they're getting the benefit of everybody who suffered before them, that maybe are getting involved in a project or initiative. I used to do a lot in HR. I didn't have a budget. I had basically nothing I could work with. So it was very appropriate. So I used to stories to help. Yes, I would tell stories about recruiting or making bad decisions about hiring and what I learned from it. And showing it wasn't about saying I did everything right. It was they remembered, unfortunately, more about what I did wrong when I shared it. But at least they gave them confidence to say, when I did give advice, she knows what she's talking. She's lived in my shoes. Yeah. So I think you all going to do. You've got an amazing opportunity with procurement. Your work is international. You're visible there. You're touching tech in so many parts of it. You can make an impact in so many areas just by your presence and your personality as embarrassed for Americans, for international. You have to tell a story, because look at all these cultures. You're not working on these projects in an isolated area. You're going out to Asia. You're going out to Central America. You're going out to Europe. Tell a story. And that way people can say, okay, you're not just coming to tell us what to do, or say, I'm so much more smarter than you. Maybe you are, but there's a softer way to get there.
Yeah, I've had the fortune to work in the UK, the US, and India.
That's right.
Working across projects, and when you go to those locations, they always feel as though somebody who's coming from another country, especially the country that's a head office of your business, is there to tell you what to do, or is there who doesn't understand the local kind of cultures, or doesn't empathize with me as an individual, and it's all down to business. And actually disassociating with yourself and making it more personal just is such a great way to actually feel like you're all in the same you're all the same people ultimately, even if you have different backgrounds, trying to do the same things.
Well, here's the thing that occurred to me, because I have a lot of my best thoughts when I'm driving in my car, and I didn't want to have this not share it with you now. The difference between the way I work. Okay, so you have storytellers and comedians, and they're there to purely entertain, and they're center stage. And yes, they do need to know their audience and connect. And it's wonderful, and it's an art and a science, and it's an act of bravery to get on a public stage and then also take people's money for it. What I do, and my purpose, if I'm doing this today, is do my pitch, do my storytelling, whether I'm doing it on a stage or I'm doing it in a one-to-one coaching or in a small training. But my goal is then to step away naturally and let the participants become the storytellers, or talking to each other, or starting to have conversations. My responsibility then is to listen, choose when I need to jump in and help a situation or protect, but it basically becomes listening. and appreciating the fact that when someone gives you a story, they're giving you an incredible gift of risk and something it's personal. It's no longer, here's the data. So I need to trust and respect that. We had a great moment on the stage yesterday when Linda Chan, now at Reuters, got up and talked about something. She gave an example of her staff. She just changed companies, and her staff each person came up and said what a difference she made, and she got very emotional. She didn't plan that.
Right.
She wanted to share that. It occurred to her that she wanted to inspire others that we can make a difference. She wasn't ready for that, but the audience respected it and gave her time. Now, if I ran and jumped on and said, oh, stop talking that, totally inappropriate. But we had something special there in the sense that she showed not just her mind the last few days, she showed her heart and way. And if I was looking to work at a company or saying who walks her talk, she's going to be the person that jumps into my mind, and it's going to be soldered in my memory going forward. Right. I won't forget her name.
You mentioned something, and I don't know if this question is too simplistic or not, but is there an art to listening? The reason I ask that is we talked, a couple of weeks ago, and I said something in a conversation which I had long forgotten about in terms of, I haven't got a great memory, I had long forgotten about it. You remembered it word for word, and you said, it's because you listened. And it made me kind of reflect and think, am I doing something wrong in not remembering things like that? Or can I do something different? Is there an art to being a good active listener?
I think you're a very good listener. I've heard your interviews. I've heard you tackle a variety of topics and make them understandable. I'm not an industry insider. I think what we have is you have a gift of listening, and that's where you're most comfortable. And sometimes the shoemaker children doesn't have any shoes. We forget to pay attention to what we say and what we think is a given, and it comes naturally. Like many skills, we don't realize what's happening. And when you said it's off the mic and spontaneous, there was a lot of wealth of information about what informed your work as well as this topic. And even like giving this and saying, well, this one of these things is definitely not my usual interview, and I'm taking a bit of a risk, and I'm all in my head, and I'm not, so you're very forthcoming. And I think everybody needs to say, okay, you had some guts there to try. So I think you're right. It's we overthink things too, part of it because we worry about being judged and what people are going to think, or this is out of my comfort zone. So listen, if I can get up in front of people and talk about Queens and subway stations and make it was the hardest thing to explain. I need help with marketing, so I'm going to call you because like Joanna Martinez said, explain your speech. And I went, and then she did the very polite, sounds interesting. Okay, that makes no sense, but it all worked. And there was a rhyme or reason to all those pieces. So
one of the things that you touched on, and I think this is really the core, actually, of the keynote, was around communication. How can we more effectively communicate? And I think being observant is a part of that. But I'd love for you to share just some of the things that you shared with us as a group, as an audience earlier today, about some of the things that we can do to really think about communicating, or maybe some things that we should stop doing. I think is just as important as some of the things that we could do.
First of all, in full disclosure, I am my own inspiration because, like all of us, we live in our heads too much, and our digital communications kind of empower us to live in our heads too much, and a lot of times reach the wrong conclusion. So for one thing, there's a lot of data behind everything I said today. I just didn't share it to the group. But it's about not jumping to conclusions or assumptions and testing. And there's numerous examples where I thought, why is this woman on an email about some project working? Why is she sounding a little irritated or angry? And if I had just lived through email back and forth, we would not have gotten past it. You can solve a lot of things if you take the time, even if we were in the wrong, to pick up the phone and find a way to have a living conversation. We're all busy, but even if we left messages sometimes, it sounds so simplistic.
It's more personal, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think just this week I wrote an email to somebody in a very positive manner, but I used one word which may be considered a negative, strong word, and, gets misrepresented, and that's not the intention at all.
And then the other thing, so we get it wrong,
yeah.
and we leave things in drafts, for one thing, was my example, which was, right. I've been there.
Yeah.
But it's, I use the expression man and women up and say you got it wrong. Be an example. Just own it. Don't put a spin on it. Mm-hmm. And that's hard sometimes. We're trying to say, well, I'm supposed to be in charge of good communications and building that. I didn't do well. But the piece is, and this is what the act of bravery was about this topic, I'm not anti-technology. I'm not anti all those things. I use it all the time. Probably the newer generation is using it differently, but I love it. I stay connected. People I wouldn't have lost touch with ages ago. But that's not where I'm concerned about. It's the personal part still needs to happen. We lose clues. We don't see the body language, the clues. You'd sit in a class. I mean, you have to listen. You have the energy is different. The empathy. This is working. Right. We decided to go live today instead on the phone and saying we can have more fun. Yeah. And I can watch what you're doing and you can signal me. But it's full on focus, and we're so distracted. We think we're being efficient, but we're creating stress sometimes. So I know I used an analogy of find your front stoop. But it's basically like finding a place to hang out and talk to somebody. Whether it doesn't mean you're going to be best friends, but give that person some time to get a little bit of a context about what's going on. That way, if there is maybe a challenge you need to sort out, it'll work a little differently. The energy is different. Same thing on phones. I used an example today, too, about I've done a lot of interviews over the years for job interviews and then for coaching. I can tell when somebody's drifted off. I can tell my husband's not paying attention on the phone. It's like your energy, and you figure like, why am I getting stressed? Because I know I'm reaching. I know I've lost the connection, literally like a phone connection. And it takes sometimes 3 minutes or 5 minutes to do something good rather than tough it out after. So my expression was full on focus and then in your space conversations. And then my other thing too. Can I say one more question?
Yeah.
I use Columbo as an example today to anybody. Google him if you don't know who he is. But it was always, and I used that analogy when I was doing employee relations years ago about one more questions or in recruiting. That one thing that's going to give you that little bit of gold that you know in your heart that there's more to that person or more we can connect. Because that's what we're all trying to do. No matter what we're doing for a living, we're all trying to try to make a connection.
Yeah. And kind of letting your personality shine. That's what email specifically really takes away from you. It's so hard to make your personality. I always try.
I do
maybe
too.
Emoticons and things like that are a way, or emojis, and other people look at it and think, what the heck is he doing using those in a business communication? So I know that we're coming up on time to wrap up today, but I had...
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. Well, we have...
I need an agent. I need to buy more time.
We have the birds listening in the background to us
I know,
as well.
It's very alive here.
How can I actually put this into practice? Some of the things that we talked about. Make it actionable for us.
If you're asking me, like, how could you work with someone like me? It's easy. First of all, it's a listening conversation about what's going on, like you would do with any client about what's in their life, what's keeping them up at night, or what you'd like to improve. Yeah. So if I'm coaching somebody, it's figuring out if I'm the right person for them, and what are some of the challenges, and what we could do together to get the person the right type of support to move forward. But if it's a training situation or a learning situation, I know training is not always the right word. It can be something as simple as having me in to do a humorous conversation with a group. It doesn't have to be a huge speech. As the warm-up act to pitch maybe a topic you want your folks thinking about. Because I've done a couple different things. And there could be learning. I mean, there was opportunities standing in these sessions these last to do more hands-on sessions of us thinking, having discussions. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. I'm a big believer. Sometimes it's just getting people around the table and talking and planning and then seeing what other resources we need. But it's simple. It's simple things. I believe, like I said, I don't know if we did it when we were recording or was before when we were planning. I don't like making things complicated. And I'm not looking to replace anybody on a team. I'm looking to complement what they're doing and enjoying it in the meantime, and then figuring out what success looks like for them. So.
Something I've always struggled with. So I've had the opportunity to work with coaches in the past, and most of the time, it's not necessarily been that I've proactively sought it. It's just happened as a result of a natural journey and conversations that have evolved into something else. But how do your clients or the people that you talk to, how do they know that this is the right time when maybe a coach could help them?
I have conversations with people, and I do a lot of listening and acting. I want to know, do I think our personalities will complement? I'm not looking to be their friend, but I want to make sure that my style of however I'm going to work with them will help them achieve their goals. Yeah. Then it becomes figuring out the plan, or it may be sometimes I can be the majority of the resource, but sometimes I know I'm going to have to pull in somebody that could really add on to the things that they need to achieve. So it's a lot of listening and learning, and sometimes saying no. Like saying, I don't think we're the right match, and sometimes people say that, and that's the right way to work. Anybody who tells you they can help you on everything for everyone is not telling the truth. And that's unfortunate, because I think most of the coaches, I have a great network of people in various different service helping want to do the right by their clients, and do right by their clients, because they're genuine and authentic and their style works. And it's kind of like dating and marriage. Like you gotta, not everything works.
Be a good kind of feel for it.
I know. It's like connection. The way you. Yes, that's my thing. I think keep a lot of listening and learning, and sometimes it's not at the right time for somebody. There might be other things, and you can't push it. You got to let that person come back and determine if it's the right time for them. My role is not to chase anybody around.
So if listeners would like to reach out, learn a little bit more about what you do, or perhaps if there's anything out there that where they could just learn a little bit more about how you help, where can they go? Is there a website, or should they connect with you on LinkedIn? What's the best way?
Well, I'm glad you asked. There's thanks to the internet, there's a load of places to find me. LinkedIn, of course, Julienne B. Ryan. Facebook, I do have a Be Engaged page there that's growing. Then there's the website. You put in J. Ryan Partners, and then put the tagline. I show up there, and I'm showing up on Procurement this week too, by the way. So it's all good. Just Google.
All right. Well, no, what I want to do is, I know I have your contact details, and there's the links to the website, so I'm going to put those on our show notes for today's episode. So nobody has to go searching; they can just click right through on the links.
Because we don't like searching; everybody wants it instantly. So I know I have to make sure we're all user friendly.
At least they know they're going to the right place. So
absolutely,
I'll include those at artofprocurement.com/storytelling.
Thank you.
That's artofprocurement.com/storytelling. So, Julienne, one last time, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you. This is great. And enjoy your journey home. And I'm sure I'm going to be talking to people in the airport and collecting more stories.
I got a 6-hour drive home from here.
God bless you. Okay, good for you.
Great to connect, and thanks for kind of sharing your perspective and your story with us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. All the best.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.